It's John here from A is for Alcoholic again. Today I got to talk with Cam, and it was a lot of fun. She works in harm reduction. She's got 8 years sober. We chatted about getting sober, about staying sober, and what sobriety means to her and to me and to anyone, and the fact that it means whatever you want it to mean. We talked about dealing in relationships, sex, love. We talked about the deep resentments of racism that come up. And it was just an all-around, genuinely fun, lovely, great conversation. Set my day off right. So I hope it does the same for you. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Cam.
Recording in progress.
Yes, it is. So good afternoon, hello, and Cam, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I found you on Instagram through your cross stitch, which I really enjoyed, and I was like, oh wow, okay, because cross stitch seemingly is such it feels like a quaint and wholesome hobby, and none of the messages on your cross stitch could be described as quaint or wholesome.
Yes.
They're quite the opposite.
Yeah. I mean,
provocative.
There's no way that it could be dainty like that. You know what I mean? Like I use like dainty materials.
Right.
But then they still have, oh, this one doesn't have blood on it. So that's good. But,
Uh-huh.
It's coming from my soul. There's like no other option,
Right. Dainty in design, not in the content.
Yeah.
Right. In the message. And I'm also excited. I have another friend who works in harm reduction in Seattle, and I do have I'm curious about all that too. And because also, it's something that for me, abstinence is really the only way with booze and, drugs and all that stuff. But that's not the only way, period. Yeah. Right. So,
yeah, like hands down, not the only way.
But to start, I always like to ask folks about, your personal story and where you remember your earliest memory with alcohol, whether it be with you or growing up around it as a child.
My earliest memory, I think it was my Aunt Toadie. They lived in Ohio. My parents' family lives in Ohio, and we would always go home, and my dad's side of the family knows how to drink. Like they know how to get it done. And my Aunt Toadie's house was always the most fun. She had these two beautiful little girls, and nice, it was like perfect family status, and we'd all get together and go over there. Every time we went over there, it was like a fucking party. Right? Like they just went hard. And my aunt was always so cool. And there was something about her that was just when she started drinking, there was something just so enigmatic and attractive. And I don't know if I had put together that that's what was happening, but it was there, right? It was always just kind of there. And I knew that I wasn't supposed to be drinking. I was one of those little kids that was terrified of drugs and cigarettes and booze. I was like, but there's something absolutely magnetic about the fact that when these people would do this thing, it would just turn into this whole party vibe. And they also didn't care what I did at that point, right? Everybody got to cut loose. And so that's earliest memory that I think I have of alcohol, maybe other than my dad having a can that I can't remember. It's definitely my aunt, and me already having that sense of always had that oh my God, this is beautiful. I've always had that romanticized idea of drugs and alcohol and cigarettes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, and it was it, you said it was just the the feeling of being around it that's like the first memory. Do you remember
Yeah.
your first drink?
Oh yeah, 100. No, I don't remember my first drink. I remember my first drunk.
Okay.
Because my first drink, I'm pretty sure, happened at those parties, right? Like in that setting, or maybe at home. Actually, that's not true. I'm one of those like whiskey on the gums babies. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh yeah, when the baby cries, just put a little whiskey on their gums, they go straight to sleep. Like I'm definitely one of those babies. But like first drunk, I was 17 years old, and my best friend's dad owns this this like cafe and ice cream shop, and I went with her and my other best friend Lydia. It was Monica and Lydia, and we go, and Monica's sister and like best friend bought booze. And I remember going in, it was after hours, we roll into the place, and I am terrified. I'm just terrified. These kids are older and they're cooler, and Courtney is the name of the one person, and Courtney's just looking at me, and I'm like, oh my God. I don't know why it's looking at me, but it's probably because I'm not cool enough or tall enough or short enough, or I'm too black, or I'm not white enough, or I'm too white, or I'm too fat, or I'm too skinny, or I'm too whatever, right? Like that's what my brain's doing the whole time. And then this bottle is produced, right? This bottle of Jack Daniels, and we don't have shot glasses, but we have those little ramekins. Like if you're a restaurant worker, you know what a ramekin is. So we have these little plastic ramekins that they use for like ice cream toppings. We go behind the counter and start pouring shots. And I'm just like drinking them, right? Like this is kind of a weird experience. Like it kind of tastes weird, but like whatever. And that, I had that first like alcohol-induced spiritual experience, right? Like at the time it wasn't like, oh my God, but it was like, oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Like it was hands down, like I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life. It was like a quiet sound of that. And like, I don't remember what the hell I did all night, but I remember what everybody else did, right? Like I was controlled. And also like, I was better than Courtney, like I was cooler than Courtney. I was better than Courtney, and nobody gave a shit about Courtney anyway. So like, why was I even worried about him to begin with? Right. And my other friend like called her girlfriend, dropped the phone, threw up on it. My other best friend tried to like vacuum it up. The one girl locked herself in the bathroom and started this ritual of scaring the shit out of us because she'd get really drunk and then like lock herself in the bathroom and be in the bathtub for hours. It was a whole thing. But I'm a just add alcohol alcoholic. So that was it for me. Like that was it. I was like, we're doing this. It was on.
Wait, somebody tried to vacuum the vomit?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because of right? It was in the dining room and we're not supposed to be there to begin with, right? Like it's in the dining room of the space, like talking to her girlfriend, drops it, throws up. I'm like, she's like green. I'm like, get her away. And then somebody there was a vacuum. So then they're trying to vacuum it up, and I was like, I don't know if this is gonna be good or not, but I don't know where the Jack is, but I'll have some more of that.
Right.
Right. Like
I just can't imagine being the parent in this home or the adult in this home and going to grab the vacuum or something and then finding the horrific smell. And I mean, you just have to throw it out. Like there's no like in the thing
I know,
bag on the inside.
Like in the wheel. That's what I was always thinking. Like in the wheel, I was like, why? I mean, honestly, like it's funny that you say that because I never thought of that before, and it's just like another. It's another one of those moments of like recognizing the repercussions of drinking, like of my drinking, like from the start, right? Like. Of course, I didn't think about his vacuum cleaner. What I had to do, like I was just lit up for the first time, right? And now I'm like, oh my God, what did happen to that vacuum cleaner? Like we just, like that poor man. I've made amends to that man. Like I was like, I wreaked havoc on your life. Like I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so. And so this happens, and you know, we're like 17 years old, and that's, I mean, I think that's about the time I started drinking too. And it's just like, wow, what an epiphany. And this is going to be beautiful. And this is all that I need to do to feel. And when you talk about those moments, or those thoughts of, I'm to this, I'm to that, I'm not enough this, I'm not enough that. And there's this absolute, and I don't think it's necessarily just alcoholic, right? But it's this human condition of wanting to fit in with wherever you're at, that we have to like find some way to be a part of this group so desperately, and especially at such a vulnerable age. You know, like, yeah, well, I'll do whatever it takes to for you to like me. And I think that's like such a classic trope of, let's go ahead and get drunk, and then all of a sudden everybody likes everybody, until we start crying and fighting
and throwing up on one another.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that in that, like, I think that alcoholics, addicts, and like anybody kind of in the realm, right? In the realm of the A's, right? Because there's so many A's of like Alcoholics Anonymous, MA, CA, GA, SLAA, SA, like all of the A's. I think that like our malady is that we just cannot deal with it, right? Like I need so deeply to fit in that I will do absolutely anything to do it, right? Like, because I do think that's part of the human condition, but other people seem to manage it just fine. You know what I mean? They're like, that was kind of uncomfortable, but I grew up, and then, I don't know, I got a car and a house and a baby and whatever. And that's great for them. I am not the one. My parents are white, just flat out. I was adopted when I was real young. My parents are white. The entire place that I lived, the entire community that I lived in was a white community. 268 people lived in the space. There was another Black person that was on the mountain that I saw once walking down the street while I was on the bus, and the kids on the bus called him old N-words, but I don't know if his name was John. It might have been, I don't know. So like I grew up in that space. And so like this whole piece of like, of like adoption, and being like, not taken, but like being given away from my biological family, plus being like placed in a community of no one that looks like me, there was just like the perfect storm for this deep, I need to belong, right? And like I had tried in so many different ways before drinking. The one right before drinking was like band. Like I loved marching band. Listen, I'm gonna flat out tell you, I love marching band.
What
to this
instrument?
day, I lose my mind. I played the clarinet.
The licorice stick. Yes.
What did you play?
The licorice. No, I didn't. But it's called the licorice stick. That's the nickname, right?
Yes. So I played the clarinet, and then senior year I was a drum major, and so I conducted the band and stood in front, did all the stuff. Loved it. But I had also started drinking at that point, so I at least fell off the podium like one time because I drank a little bit too much. It happens. But like that was the thing right before I found alcohol. When I found alcohol, I did absolutely anything to fit in with people that drank alcohol, which is not super great.
To say the least. Yes, I do. Yes,
like,
I do.
had already been doing it because I'm like, I could not be a Black woman or a Black queer person in that space safely. And so I had already been like, when I talk about it in spaces, I talk about giving away pieces of my spiritual condition to people. And that's kind of what it was. Of just like, I had the best Black jokes. I had the best jokes about women. I had the best rape jokes. Like I would pull these things out when I went to spaces, kind of as like a shield to be like, hey, it's safe. I'm safe. I'm not that Black person. I'm not a woman like that. You know what I mean? I'm more one of the guys. Like, I'm not sensitive. So like I have rape jokes. Like I'm not any of those things that you think I am that might be dangerous. I'm like more of one of the guys. So pass me the jack. Right.
And going back just a quick bit, this community that you lived in, what was this? You were talking about growing up in a community of.
Oh, it was literally just a mountain. I was just on top of the mountain. We were like 20 minutes from Gettysburg, 30 minutes from 30 and 45 minutes from the other surrounding town. There's only 4 ways onto the mountain, and 3 of them are mainstream. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So fairly isolated in
Yeah.
general terms.
And there were Black people that were on that mountain, but they were incarcerated in 2 different juvenile detention centers. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So trying to find a place and a space to fit in is not an easy thing. Was not an easy thing. No. So drinking at 17, now you've unlocked it, right? The achievement unlocked. You found the key. You are on your way to a successful, blessed, and exciting life.
Yeah.
And does it go without consequences for long?
No.
Okay, so very quickly.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't even remember what happened. It was in June when that happened. And by content warning. So it was by June. By August, it was in June. It might have been early June. It might have been May. So in May, it happened. By June, I had slept with my best friend's boyfriend on her birthday. By August, I had been raped at a party, which was not rapist rape, so that's not a my fault thing. But I had a party at my house. It was a whole situation. And so that happened. And I had attempted to commit suicide at that point. And then maybe, I don't know, a few months later, I also, content warning, touched my first dick for a 5th of Jack. So first 6 months did great. You know what I mean? Just if there were any lines to cross, I crossed all of them. I was like, whoop.
Well, and then once you've gotten past all that, then the rest is gravy, right? You're okay, I can do anything if I have hit all these lows, right? Then I imagine finding a rock bottom is a little bit different.
Well, they didn't feel like lows. You know what I mean? They weren't lows. They just were.
Yeah.
Because you have to do what you got to do, right?
Right.
It always makes me think of cigarettes. It's I smoked cigarettes for, I don't know, I quit when I had, God stopped me when I had 2.5 years of sobriety, thank God. But cigarettes were always a part of the equation. You know what I mean? I never thought about holding money back. It just was, no matter what you do, you have to have cigarettes. And that's how alcohol was, right? Alcohol was always innately a part of the equation. And so if I had to sleep with someone to get a ride to go to the place, I'd just do it. If I had to sleep with someone to stay at a place, I'd just do it. If I had to do that incomprehensible demoralization, if I had to do something bad, it didn't matter. It didn't feel like a consequence, and it didn't feel bad. I just had to do it, right?
Yeah, I remember talking with a friend of mine many years ago when another friend of ours had a kid, and we were all very surprised, and we were all very, very deep in our alcoholism at the time. And I said something to the effect of, man, how is he going to be able to afford to drink and smoke and whatever? And the buddy that I was talking to was like, don't worry about it. He'll find money for whiskey and cigarettes.
Yeah.
And it always kind of stuck with me, because to me, having a child was this big epiphany, and things were going to change.
Yeah.
And very little changed in the short term. We just drank at home more, where we could put the baby on the couch. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's just a matter of fact. It doesn't feel like a low, and it doesn't feel like a bottom. And so how long does this go on before anything starts to feel like maybe there needs to be a change?
I was told to change. Didn't feel like it, but I was told to change after I flipped my second car. That's not true. I forgot my second DUI, but I totaled my fifth car. They were like, you need to stop. And I was like, cool. I'm not going to do that. Actually, I stopped drinking and smoked a lot of pot and snorted a lot of pills. And then, the day came where I had that drink. And so it wasn't until like 3 months before the end of my drinking that I even like made an actual attempt to stop drinking. And even then I was like, this isn't a problem. But in that 3 weeks, in that like 3 month span of time, it stopped doing what it did for me. It stopped making my head go quiet, right? There's nothing worse drinking and like expecting to just be able to operate in life, and instead you're drinking and you remember that time you got out of jail and made your mom cry, or the time you slept with your best friend's boyfriend, or the time that you stole this, or the time that you lost that job because of this and lied to everybody about it, right? Like my head just kept getting louder and louder when I drank. And I was like, shit, I need to do something. This is awful. Yeah. And like getting sober wasn't the option. The option was kill myself, but I was also like not going to do that. I was like, maybe I had moved to Baltimore and like still had a lot of internalized racism and oppression and stuff. And was like, maybe I can just walk into a bad neighborhood and get shot. Which is like, also like super, just shenanigans. Right? Like just super delusional and a bit much.
Yeah.
And also like, I don't want to take responsibility for any of my actions. So like, let's hope that this happens.
Right. I don't, yeah. Killing myself would be too much personal responsibility. And I'm not into that. But if I die just because of something that happened around me, then yes, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. The skewed thinking, that's just the bizarro thinking. And it reminded me of when you talk about the alcohol not working anymore. And it would still be another couple years before I quit. But I remember one night where I drank a whole bottle of Kettle One vodka, and I was walking around the house and I wasn't drunk. And I was like, what the fuck? How much more do I need? I was like, I need to get drunk right now, and I'm not. And the only thing I could think of was that maybe I'd had too big of a dinner.
Yeah.
Maybe I had too much to eat and I need to start drinking on an empty stomach.
Yes!
Because I drank a whole bottle.
Grade A alcoholic thinking. That's fucking awesome.
It was like 2012 or something. I'm just wandering around this little house smoking cigarettes thinking, should I go get another bottle? Can I drive? I feel fine.
Yeah.
It was madness. It was real deal madness. And so in those 3 months prior to your final drink, when you finally you start to realize that nothing is working, the stuff that was working before has ceased to work. What leads you into that moment of saying, maybe I should try sobriety?
My ego. There was a bunch of stuff that was happening around me that I couldn't see because I was drunk, that I started to see. I worked at a coffee shop, and this young kid, he was like 19 and like glowing, would come in. We'd talk all the time. And he was sober. Somebody broke his anonymity. And so I knew that. He lost his job, which was close to my job. I lost my job. We like met at the light rail by accident. My boyfriend was with me, and he was getting on the light rail, and so was this other kid. And we're like, yeah, let's hang out sometime. But I didn't have his phone number. You know what I mean? So he gets on the train. My boyfriend gets on the train, whatever. My boyfriend calls me and is like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I think this was a dumb idea for me to do this, but I got that kid's number for you if you need it. And like, if you want to like hang out. And I was like, all right, weird, but okay. So I have this kid's number, and like, I'm not using it for anything, but I got it. And the people that I work with, the one girl, gets a DUI, she wakes up with cheese all over her and was like missing a tooth or whatever, wakes up in jail, calls the coffee shop I work with and was like, hey, can you call the like parent company and tell them I'm in jail? And I was like, okay. And so she gets out and is like, I'm not an alcoholic, but they told me I have to go to AA so it can look good. And I was wasted one night. I was like, I'll go with you. I've been to AA before. It's not that big of a deal. It's not big and scary. I'll go with you. Fast forward, she goes to a treatment program for 2 days and comes out and is like, I've seen the light. And I'm like, oh my God, you're screaming and I am hungover. She's like, I want to come over. And I'm like, whatever. By this point in time, I had gotten fired from the job. It's Friday. It's the last paycheck that I get from that space. She comes over and is like, blah, blah, blah. It's just telling me all the stuff. I'm relating to everything she's saying, which I don't recognize as bad for me, right? Because she's like, I'm an alcoholic and I'm relating completely to her. And she's like, I need to go to a meeting. And I was like, shit, I know a kid that I think goes to meetings. So I call him, he hooks us up with a ride. I told her I would go with her. And I was like, shit, now I got to go to this meeting with this person. We go and we pick up my paycheck and her paycheck. And I end up in this like 2-seat, like this like super tiny car with 2 doors with this kid that's probably 19. I'm 23. She was like 24, 25. End up in this kid's car that's like, I don't even know. He's like drooling. It was like when they had the big vapes with the like plumes. He's like pluming smoke everywhere. And it's just like, yeah, I used to be an asshole, but like I came to AA and I got sober and everything's sweet. And I'm like, what did I do? Like, what did I do to deserve it? Why did I get in this car?
Yeah.
And I went to a meeting and it was the second step meeting. And the night before I said, for the first time in my life, I don't believe in God anymore. And the second step meeting is about coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves. I left and I was like, well, shit. If that's not a God, I don't know what it is. But not like white bearded Jesus, right? It was just hope. I just got some hope.
Right.
Yeah. And then I've been here since.
You got sober at 23?
Yeah. Or 24, the jury's out. I'm not good with time.
Okay. I am so, I don't know, maybe it's a resentment. It's probably a resentment because I didn't get sober until I was 38.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly, whenever I'm lamenting something, I'm always like, if I'd only gotten sober 10 years earlier, I could have done this and this and this and this and this. And those people who get sober in their 20s, I'm just like, fuck them. They don't know what it's really like. And I know I
totally hear that. I totally hear that because I've thought that about people that are younger than me, right? I didn't know that I was young. Like that's the other piece, is that I was going to these young people's meetings and I was like, ew, these kids are so young and they're just talking about how they love Adam Levine and shoes and I don't want to hang out with any of them. Like I did not recognize that at all because I felt older than I have even biologically reached. You know what I mean? Like it was just so heavy and so dark that like it took me, I don't know, I had been 3 or 4 years sober and started talking about like, yeah, I was 23 when I got sober. And people were like, oh my God, you're so young. I was like, I don't know. I wouldn't have made it. Like, I could not continue to do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, and the things you talk about going through and a lot of people go through in their active alcoholism kind of accelerates the aging, at least psychologically, right? Yeah. Societally, the things that we end up doing and going through and experiencing, because those are things that, a quote unquote normal 17-year-old or 20-year-old wouldn't find themselves doing. So you learn a lot about what people are willing to do, what you are willing to do, and what people will put you through for a bottle or of booze or pills or whatever, So now that you are here, and how long have you been sober now?
8 years and 7 months, I think.
Congratulations.
That is good.
That's a good chunk of time. And so you work in harm reduction, right?
Yeah.
And so you've been sober for 8 years. I'm sure that the first couple, I mean, I don't know, was it difficult at first or did you just click right into it like you did with the first shot of Jack? Yeah.
I clicked in. Yeah. I was like, I was like, I don't know, this is weird, this is uncomfortable. But that like that initial like there must be something was really helpful. I had that desperation thing, and I also felt like I had like this clean slate with God where I was like, okay, I don't know, I thought you were gonna smite me, but maybe you're not, right? Like I had this like, maybe it's okay. And so I just dropped in and like clicked in, excuse me, got to, just quickly got to 9 within 3 months, switched, worked all of them, started sponsoring people within the first 6 to 7 months, service, all that jazz. Just did that shit. Went to probably 2 meetings a day for the first year, and then one after that, just like going.
Damn. Nice work.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, like, somebody, like I was being pushed. I really didn't want to drink again. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't want to drink and die. It looks very unattractive. And I also have that little like healthy fear, right? Like, I respect alcoholism. It's fucking remarkable the lengths that we will go to kill ourselves. Right? And it's so deep and it's so dark. And like the recovery process or the recovering process, like whatever, there's so much joy that can come from that and so much beauty that can come from that. But it's still so absolutely terrifying to me. And so yeah, I like clicked in. Harm reduction came, I don't know, 3 or 4 years in. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have a foundation, hands down.
So let me ask you this, coming from an abstinence-based program, right? Where we say it was drilled into my head that you will not, if you want to stay, if you go out there, you're going to die, and I always felt a little kind of like, settle down, like, I mean, part of me knew, like, okay, I get it, like, but can we settle down? There's just some crusty old guy who I absolutely love and says a million brilliant things in the span of, his 3-minute share or whatever, but I'm just like, the whole, like, just settle down, okay? I just want to get the information. I need a little of that softer, gentler way now, but like, the whole, like, you're gonna die. And I'm like, right? But if that's
down, man.
Yeah, that was always my feeling when I'd be in these meetings. But there was also a part of me still to this day that knows that I could, intellectually, I could probably have a drink, right? I could probably have one, and I could probably move on with but in the back of my head, I'd be like, I had that one drink that while back and nothing happened. Maybe I could have like 2 of them. And then like, what if we, what if I just kept the bender to myself and didn't tell anyone? Right? Like, so that it's already escalating in my head and I haven't had a drink yet. And I work in a restaurant, and they had some non-alcoholic beer, and someone's like, this tastes just like regular beer. Do you want to try some, John? And they know that I don't drink. I was like, no, not really. I didn't really care for beer that much when I drank, and I don't want to drink something that tastes like beer because it usually tastes like shit, and it's just empty cow. What's the point at this point? And so, and non-alcoholic beers are not always fully non-alcoholic, and I don't need to trigger whatever weird little cell is floating around in my head just waiting to be unlocked. Like, so, it's like a horror movie, right? I was just waiting. So it reminds me, there was a movie called Dr. Sleep, which was like sort of the sequel to The Shining, and he's like locking the demons into little boxes in his head. And I'm like, that's kind of how I feel. That like, I haven't released all of my demons. Some of them are just locked in the box, and we'll get there eventually. I haven't, I've been through all the steps, but I guess there's need to do them a few more times, probably. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to go through it again. That being said, my question was, and still is, going from an abstinence-based program into harm reduction can seem a little they're kind of antithetical. So how did you find yourself working in harm reduction?
So I was that old crotchety white man that was like, "You gotta drink and die!" Like, yo, I just straight up was throwing big books at people when I first got, like, my first year and a half of sobriety. I was like, first of all, did you know that you can get sober? Did you know? And that life can be fucking great? And everybody's like, "Oh, I've been here for 12 years. Yes." And so I'm just running around like, "You gotta do the steps, and you gotta do them exactly as they're written down. If you don't do that, you're gonna drink it down." So I did that for an extended period of time. And there's been this like evolution of like shedding of old ideas, because I've heard in spaces that like our old ideas aren't just the ones that we came in with, right? Like we are consistently picking up and holding on to old ideas, because like my idea from yesterday is an old idea, right? Like it's a pretty extreme case, but like I've picked, like, that was an old idea, right? That if you don't do it exactly like you do it in the book, you're going to drink and die. And so, like, some of that stuff started to fall away. And what happened is that I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I was a barista, but I'm like, my body is like broken and sad. And was like, you can't do this shit anymore. And I was like, I don't have any other skills, which is not true. But at the time, I was like, I've literally only been in the restaurant industry, and I'm like not great at that, right? Like I used to be really good at it, but now I'm like, bitch, you want me to get you a fork? They're over there, right? So I'm just like not I'm not the one. And so I do this C-car class, and I have no idea what the hell it's called, but it's for peer recovery specialists.
Okay.
And so this was probably like 2014, and like this whole peer scene is blowing up. I go for like a week. I do this like 30-hour course. And in this course, this guy's name is, I think it was Dr. Carol Conquest. And he's like, what is sobriety? And I was like, oh, he must not know that I'm here. And I was like, let me go ahead and let somebody else answer this question, because, you know, I know, but let me just let somebody else do it. And this guy raised his hand, and he said what I would say, right? It's like abstinence, right? Just no drinking, no any of the things. Right. And the guy was like, the Dr. Carol Conquest was like, no, like sobriety is whatever you say it is. And so these two start battling about what sobriety is, because the guy's like, no, you can't, blah, 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 blah. It was just a whole thing. Meanwhile, I'm having an existential crisis because I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean sobriety is? And I had this like thought pattern that was like, what happens if I believe that? What happens is if I believe that people can identify what sobriety is for them. Does that mean that I can smoke pot, which is never a thing I've ever liked to do? It always made me think that I piss myself. So I'm like, but that's what my brain said, right? It's like, does that mean that I can do stuff? And this thought came that was like, it's none of your business. Like, you know that abstinence-based sobriety is for you. Like, you know that to your core, and that's where you need to be. So other people's lives, it's none of your business. You're not God. You don't get to say what they need. And I was like, all right. And so like, it just kind of like dropped down. And so from then I've been like continuing to build that. Cause I was like, I really do believe that. It's like, I don't get to say who needs what, right? Like, that's not my job. My literal job is to make sure that I give people the stuff that they ask for, and ask them if they need anything else. Like, do you need more syringes? Do you need more Narcan? Do you need, like, you know, if they're asking like, hey, do you guys have any socks? Be like, I don't this week, but we might have socks next week, right? Like, that's my job. My like personal life is to be like, do you want to be sober? I might be able to help you with that. I can put your hand in the hand of like a higher power, and you guys can do that. And if you don't think you're a drunk, you don't have to be here, right? Like, but they're two different things. And it's like, I'm consistently living in that kind of paradox is really what it is. It's like, I've almost always been living in this space of, I am Black and I live in a completely white community, right? Like I am sober and I'm surrounded by people who use drugs. Like it's just kind of a thing that I have been in, and I trust that like my higher power, my ancestors, my God, whatever I call it in any given day, like I trust that I'm taken care of as long as I do the shit I'm supposed to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about originally that feeling of God just being a feeling of hope. And I really like that as well, because it's like, oh, okay, I can relate to that, and constantly having the conversation about God, and it's always extraordinary. It was extraordinarily difficult for me at first to come to that. But helping somebody, like you said, I can put your hand in the hand of a higher power, is, I think, one of the best things that we do as recovering alcoholics, regardless of the choices they make, right? Because it's like, okay, here you go, here's the thing that I did, this is how I did it. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but it's not my responsibility if you don't, and it's not my fault, and I don't need to feel bad, and all of those things. And it's, and I've met other recovered alcoholics, people with far more time than I have, people I admire and respect, and their sobriety is, I don't drink, but say every couple times a year, magic mushrooms or whatever it is, right? So far be it for me to say you're not sober enough.
It's like not my job.
Right. And it's not like, I'm not interested. Who am I to be doing purity tests on people? I mean,
yeah. That's what that line came to me the other day, because I've been thinking like, who am I to say there's no God? And I'm like, who am I to say you're not sober, right? Who am I to say that like you're not doing it right? Like just kind of the who am I is like a good rule for me to live by, because I'm like, oh shit, I am not the one. Like I'm just not the one, girl. Like I'm not.
Yeah. So you found this made more sense to you, this way of thinking of like just helping people get through the day, helping them with their addictions, whether that be providing them with safety and security to fulfill those addictions if they don't want to quit.
Well, not all drug use is chaotic drug use, right? And I think that was part of the stuff, is like through the action of sponsoring people, like the idea that I could get people sober or I could get them drunk was like, that was like another old idea that was like kind of smashed, because like I didn't know that, I thought I was responsible for people when I first got sober. Like I thought I was responsible for their sobriety and all this stuff, even though people were like, nah girl, that you're not the one. And so it's taken a while to get to that point. And then I'm in this space where like there are people I think that I was in the space so long where all use is chaotic use, that I forgot that that's not the case, right? Because like my mother is like the tiniest little adorable white woman. She's like 5 foot, like 98 pounds, soaking wet and frozen. And she will mix her wine with like soda, right? Like Fresca. And then she'll have like one of them. Or if she doesn't do that and she has like a glass of wine and a half, she gets flushed and she tells me how much she loves me and she's giggly, and then she starts crying and she passes out. There are people that drink like that. You know what I mean?
I do.
Like, and she doesn't like it doesn't get that far until like, that's like, I don't know, once every 3 months, if that. And so it took me a while to see that with alcohol. And then there are people that have been using heroin for 50 years, right? There are people that have been using heroin for 50 years that are productive members of society. There are people that smoke crack that are productive members of society. And like, the other thing is that it doesn't matter if they're productive members of society or not, right? They're human beings they're human beings just like me that deserve like love and care and attention. And there's like the marginalization of people that use drugs is huge. I'm in Baltimore City. The marginalization of Black people that use drugs is huge. And so just the fact that there's like this marginalization and dehumanizing, like taking away people's ability to make choices about their own body is dehumanizing. Right. And so there are people that are like, well, if we don't criminalize drug use, then how are we supposed to send them to court where they can go to rehab? And I'm like, bitch, that is not the only way you can go to rehab, first of all. And second of all, like, not everybody wants to go to rehab. Like, that's like not everybody's desired choice. So, like, my job, like, I just give people what they want and what they need. It's not my job to like be coercive or judgmental, because I believe it's everybody's human right to make their own choices.
Right.
Regardless if it's chaotic or not, right? Because not all of it's chaotic, and some of it is chaotic, and people are still using. But like, you know what I mean? Like, I can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a I've never heard it put that way, but you know, not all drug use is chaotic drug use, and people have found, you know, there's what's the word is manageable, right? That we heard over and over and over in the program. It just became unmanageable. So if it's still manageable, that's none of my business.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that looks unmanageable to me that seems to be manageable to other people, or maybe unmanageable to everybody involved. But it's still like, it's still where they want to be and what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've lived like that too, right? Like, shit is unmanageable, but I'm still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know lots of people who are managing with, and, you know, they're still, we'll talk about their hangovers or how much they drank. And I find it boring, but I try not to judge and just go, okay, I'm going to go walk over here, or that's great, or wow. The story of you puking in the bathroom at the bar, it's just not like, it's kind of gross. And, you know, like, I'm just like,
yeah,
we don't know each other. Why are you sharing this with me? Like,
oh shit. I find it fascinating. I love that. I honest to God, I'm like, these people are talking about it. I'm like, tell me more, honey, because you know what I mean? I'm like, I think this is delightful. And I remember being that person and people being like, girl, and I'm like, I didn't know, you know what I mean? I didn't know. And a lot of the time I'm like, I don't know if there will ever be this period where you want to stop, or that's a thing. And so I'm like, shit, girl, I'll sit here and talk to you about that. And I will tell you about the fact that I used to pee myself when I threw up. So I would take off my underwear and my pants so that I could throw up so I could keep drinking. Right? Like, I'm like, fuck it, girl.
I'm not going to ruin a good night by, you know, for a little
I'm not going to ruin a good night by having to throw up.
Yeah.
Or smelling like pee.
Right. Exactly. Right. You had it. That's it. You knew what you were doing. You had a plan.
Yeah, that's what I had, a plan of action.
But I just, you know, and yeah, it doesn't have to be, it's really none of my business. And another thing that I found out about myself with this program versus other ones is I went to a Buddhist refuge recovery meeting once.
Ooh, yeah.
And I came home, and the woman I was dating at the time, we were talking, and I said, I don't know how these people stay sober. There was no structure, and it was very loose. And that was just my perception of it, right? Like, it's got its own tenets and stuff like that. And she looks at me and goes, John, it's not them. You need the structure. You need the rigidity. You need the rules. Damn. That's why what works for you works for you. And I was like, you're absolutely right. Damn it. You're absolutely right. I was like, oh, it was me. Here I am judging somebody else's recovery. Yeah. And lo and behold, it's like, maybe just, you know, stay in your lane and do the thing that works for you. I know it was a big thing. I was like, oh, yeah. Shit. What? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that was part of the the shift in my thinking as well. And two, like, I've been dealing with pain over the last year and an injury, and like, oh God, like, I don't want to, obviously I'm not interested in narcotics, but somebody's mentioning CBD oil, and I'm like, I don't know, man, like, that seems weird. And then I was like, I'm in so much pain, I'll try anything. And then I got scammed on some CBD oil that was just hemp oil, and hemp oil is not necessarily bad, but it doesn't really have the same effects, and so on and so forth, and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that there might be something out there that can help me not feel pain every single day, I'm going to look into that. And I'm not going to let something like purity get in the way of me living a better life.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes me think of the book in so many ways. Like, there's the line that everybody talks about being happy, joyous, and free, which is like, I don't remember what it is because I don't pay attention to it. To be completely honest, the line that I'm focused on currently is we insist on enjoying life. And it's in context of like not carrying the world's, not being cynical about the world and carrying the world's problems on our shoulders, which I will set to the side to say that I will come back to that. I'm going to put that over there. But I don't necessarily think it is in God's plan for me to suffer, right? And I think that there have been times, like, I broke my ankle. The whole reason I stopped smoking right after I broke my ankle, because God was like, it literally removed the desire to smoke for like 3 days. And I was like, fuck, we got to roll with this. Because like, I had been trying, right? I had been trying and failing miserably. I was like sober, like stealing cigarettes from my roommate and shit. Like, it was just a whole thing, like being late to work and like chain smoking 8 cigarettes during work. It was just a whole thing. And so broke my ankle, was like, no narcotics, the whole fucking thing. And then when I woke up from surgery, it was like there was a little man with a tiny bonfire in my ankle. I was like, fuck. And so I took the narcotics. Like, I went home to my parents and they doled them out to me. I hated it. I also didn't get high and was really confused. I was like, what is this? I was like, why do I feel nauseous? The doctor was like, you're going to get constipated. Here's some stool softeners. I was like, bitch, I used to snort this shit on the regular. You don't know me. Nope. Turns out I got constipated. And that was the whole thing. I was like, I'm going to take stool softeners and eat ice cream because I'm lactose intolerant, and that will help. Shit myself on my parents' couch. It was a whole situation twice.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
My brain, after I stopped taking them, was sending me dreams. It was like, first of all, you took too many. You didn't take the right amount. You're high right now. And I was like, shit, brain. Like, I can't deal with this shit. And so I was terrified to take that again. I was afraid to take it again. I walked around on my ankle, which was still damaged, and nobody believed me, for a year and a half, standing for 8 hours at a time at a coffee shop, walking around. I would get picked up. We would head to a meeting, and from the time I got picked up to like getting to the meeting, my ankle would settle, and it would take me 45 minutes to get out of the car. We would miss half of the meeting because I couldn't walk. Right. And I kept doing that to myself because I was afraid to look into any other options. Right. And so I have that experience to share with people, which is great. But like, I didn't need to do that. Right. There was a lot of like not really listening, not really like communicating with my higher power and other people about it. I just felt like I was stuck, and it's like what I had to do. And I was like, girl, I don't think I had to do that. Right. Like, I mean, I had to because of life, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't think that's a thing that everybody has to do. Like, I don't have to be a pain martyr. Right. And so, yeah, there's stuff out like I have friends that use like CBD stuff in general. And I'm like, that's great. Like, it takes your pain away. And that's like what you need. Right. Mm-hmm. And like, if that comes up again, like, that's a space that I'll have to revisit too. Right. Like, if I'm in that position, yeah, I totally hear that though. Right. Like, you got to do something. Like, I would never recommend doing what I did in that space. It was awful.
Right. Yeah. And I was, and I run, and I was talking to another friend of mine about running, and I was explaining to her, you know, my problems, my issues, the injuries, the pain. And she's like, John, you know, it's okay. It doesn't have to, every run doesn't have to be this suffering thing. You know, you can get like better shoes. Like I would suggest you could even get, she was saying, you can get a hydration pack and you can have water while you're running on those long runs. You don't have to feel like you're, I was like, oh, you mean I could have a little bit of comfort and water, you know, because in my mind, there's like this holdover from being an alcoholic, thinking that suffering brings some sort of accomplishment. And I think there's something to that in the athletic part of it, sure. And running has certainly helped me, much like alcohol, to deal with suffering. But it doesn't have to be like that every single damn day, every single time, right? I can learn these lessons through, you know, I've suffered enough. What's another way that I could learn a lesson? So
I feel that deeply.
So I've kind of loosened my thoughts on sobriety as well. And so that's why I'm always I find it very interesting, this idea of harm reduction and helping people just get through the day, even if like maybe today is not the day they're interested in getting sober or changing their life, because they're who knows, who the fuck knows what they're going through right now. Maybe I just need the thing I need.
There's also like a lot of, when we're talking about like poor marginalized groups of people, there's so much other shit, right? Like being in a 12-step community is a fucking privilege. Like the fact that there's a space to go to at any point in time, that there's a community that will be there for you whether you want them to or not, right? Like we'll love you till you love yourself, that whole status.
Right.
The fact that like when you do connect to that and you start to like have fellows around you, there are so many opportunities for shit, right? Like I don't have a job and Kevin runs a construction company and Sarah's a restaurant, right? There are so many ways to plug in. Like I've been given so much from being in, and it really feels like a privilege for me. And so the people that I'm serving don't have that privilege. And sometimes they don't have that privilege because they're resentful of, I mean, I don't know if it's because they're resentful of, but like some people don't want to be in AA because they're resentful of it for all kinds of reasons. Like my uncle was in AA and he was still an asshole. Or I went and they told me that I couldn't do this, and that, right? Because it's not, the program is, it's not perfect, but the program is great. The people are the people, right? We're humans. We're going to fuck shit up. And so we do all kinds of crazy shit. And then people get mad at us, right? It's a whole resentment machine. And so, yeah, there's just so many reasons that people don't want to come to the rooms and are fucking deeply marginalized because of where they are anyway, right? And so it's like, getting sober is like the last thing I'm thinking of because it's fucking cold and I don't have a place to sleep, right? And like, I'm hungry and my socks are wet. Or like, you know, we give out not food, but we give out like Boost protein shakes and like candy and like sex stuff. We give out all kinds of stuff because it's like, it's not just about the fact that people are using drugs. It's the fact that they are whole human beings that have these entire lives. And like, what do people need? Like getting sober is fucking hard. And like, I know the book says you can do it under any and all circumstances. And I do believe that. And I also believe that like, damn, well, it'd be a hell of a lot easier if I had a place to sleep. Shit, you know what I mean? Like, it might be like, that might be the case, but like, that book was also written by white men in the 30s, right? Like white men in the 30s that had like connections. And like, even though people were done with them, they were still like getting connections. And so like, I work with, you know, I mean, we work with everyone, but like, you know, the Black population there's already so much trauma when we talk about drugs because of the racist war on drugs, which is like 145 years old, that like, that space is like, my heart is open for that to begin with, because I'm like, God damn, like there's already a lot going on there. And like poor white people have been swept up in it too, right? Poor white, because, you know.
Sure.
You know, poor, like if you're poor, they don't give a shit who you are, right? Like it's like, if you're in that, if you're poor and you use drugs, you're all in the same boat with a little bit different, or maybe not in the same boat, but like two boats that are connected.
Sure. Yeah. One of them's
But
got a little more racism to it, but yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Uh-huh.
one's got like some encounters some different stuff, which is so the like other piece of that quote of like we insist on being on living, or we insist on enjoying life, the the like not giving into the cynicism of the world and not holding that shit on our shoulders brings me to blackness, because I would be remiss to not talk about this. I always,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the reality is that I like did not know that I was black until I got sober and until Freddie Gray was murdered. I had been operating, I had been feeling things because my body has been feeling it for years. This stuff I couldn't identify when I was younger, and I couldn't identify until I got sober, but like fear and discomfort and confusion about the ways that I had been treated in certain situations. And yeah, in 2015, Freddie Gray was murdered in the city. The city, we had an uprising. And in that span of time, I was like, oh shit, I am black. I have such strong feelings about this. And like from then has been this journey of unraveling internalized oppression, internalized racism, and what it means for me to operate in the world. And so like, first of all, couldn't do any of that when I was sober or without being sober. Second of all, that has changed the way that I operate in the rooms and in sober spaces. Because around that time, I was like, well, shit, like all these people around me were like, that had also gotten sober young, that were white, were like, it was like their tricycle fell over and they just got picked up and put back on the track, right? And so they got the job back, they got the car, they got a dog, they got a partner, they moved in together, they got married, they're having a baby. Now they sponsor 12 other people that are also on the same track. And I was like, I'm fucking disabled, I can't drive. I didn't know if I was going to go back to school or not. I'm poor. There's all this stuff, and I'm like comparing myself to these people. And I was like, shit, what's happening? And then I ended up in a space where I was like, shit, that's also like not a space that's not really made for me. That's like white American dream status that's not made for me. And it's more than that. There's a ableism thing there. There's all kinds of stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to stop comparing myself. And so I started to do the work around interrogating like what my identity is and how I interact with my identity and other people. And so now, like, you know, we talk about outside issues and that kind of stuff. Like, this shit is not an outside issue for me, right? Like, my skin is black, which is an outside of my body issue, but like all of the stuff that like happens is very, very deeply connected to the way I interact with the world and resentments that I pick up or don't pick up. And so like that is a space that that I've stepped in more fully, is like talking about these issues in meetings with people. I was like a golden child in the white rooms for a minute because I sound like this. I'm relatively cute. I'm relatively smart, right? And so I'm like that black. I'm like I was tokenized as like, you know, and like I'm a little superstar because I got sober and I'm doing well and all that shit. And now I'm like, not today, girl. I roll into your meeting and I'm gonna tell you, racism, bitches. This shit is hard. I'm like, I write white bitches out all the time. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I go and like, say that, and people may or may not like it, but it's not for everyone, right? Everybody's message isn't for everyone.
Right. Right.
And so, and we're supposed to be looking for what we relate to anyway. So I go into a space and I'm like, surprise, I'm black. There's always one black person or like one person of color. And so I'm like, I got some meetings on the slide for you if you want to come. And then white people are like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what? I just quoted the book at you. I don't know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to love it, you're going to hate it, but it might not be for you. And it took me a while to realize that not every story was for me also, right? Like in my story, I'm not for everyone.
Right. No, I mean, it's just, yeah. And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, that's okay. Like if you're not interested, then tune out and find something else. And please do that. And then if that doesn't, you know, it's like I used to say, advice I was giving to somebody was about going to a meeting. And if that one sucks, go to another one. And if that one's terrible, try another one. And if that one's terrible, try another one. And so, it's it takes what it takes, but
Yeah.
giving up, or as you put it, giving into the cynicism of the world is not helpful in that moment of trying to get sober. And dealing with all of the resentments and everything, that and everything that's happened over the last year and a half, right? Not just pandemic wise, but all of the exposing of the racial inequalities that have always been here, and people have been talking about and screaming about, and now, only now, have some, and I'm not speaking for everyone, you know what, I'll just speak for myself. That I had been able to, on some level, even though I had dated a Black woman for 5 years, ignored a lot of these things, compartmentalized a lot of these things, been able to say, you know what, that is not my issue, or that is not my, I'm not going to champion that. I was like, okay, well, I'm more about, sobriety. That's my thing. There's not really much I can do about racism in America. So we're just going to move on. Right. And so then for me to come to my own epiphanies about this, and to, as you put it, fall off my tricycle. Nobody's like, yeah, John, sure, your knee's skinned. We've been getting run over here forever. Right? Like, that's fine. Did you want some sympathy? Because now's really not the time to ask for it. And so that's part of the other half of the epiphany. Oh my God, the world is horrible. Also, John, shut up. Right? You're gonna be okay, buddy. You're gonna be all right. You're gonna get over this. I know it hurts, and I'm sorry you're just now seeing it at 44 years old. Oh, and how was that? Was that lovely the last 40 years, not being able to see this? That must have been pretty nice, because and then you hear stories like, when was the first time you learned about racism? And then like all of the horrifying stories that come up. So I mean, that's just my own personal story of the last 18 months in that respect. So it's there's a lot, right? There's a lot. And so far be it for me to pontificate to anyone about those things, but I've also gotten a very small sliver of insight as far as the resentments that the woman that I was dating, that she had in the area of race, and navigating the world in a way that I never had to. And saying, and jokingly saying things to me like, you just got to go into the bank and get one of those white guy loans, like that's what you need to do, John. And she's half joking, but also we know that's how it works.
Yes.
So dealing with resentments is a big part of it, of getting sober, but it doesn't end. It doesn't end with alcohol.
I'm a resentment factory. I can make that shit up any second, every day.
Mm-hmm.
I also really appreciate my thing that I'm like, so I was like, I'm sober, I'm championing sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm Black, bitches, deal with
Mm-hmm.
it. And so like I go to the restaurants, and there are those like 3 like coffee shops. They're like my favorite. And there's 3. There's like compost and trash and recycling. I throw everything in the trash, and people are like, what are you doing? I was like, listen, I do not have time for recycling. And so when you said like at that point, like you were like, I don't have time, like I'm championing other things. That's what I like literally tell people. I'm like, listen, I am too Black for recycling. Like I am full up on championing stuff. I'm like, listen, young kids, y'all got it. I will back you, but I am not the one. I can't do it.
Right. Yeah. There's only so much. There's capacity is a real thing.
Yes.
But also I have found that my capacity is a lot bigger than I initially thought.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
So, but
I hear
also
that.
I'll give you another silly little example is I was getting tired of all the plastic in my life and all the bottles and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, there's a refill center opening in my town. I'm going to go there and I'm going to bring these bottles in and I'm going to get refills on detergent and my shampoo and conditioner. Maybe it's not the exact brands that I like, but whatever. I'm just going to do it. This is my sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
This is I don't get my favorite brand of conditioner. That's my sacrifice in this world. Good grief. So I go there and it cost me like $30 to fill up 3 bottles. And I was like, you know what? I can't. This is cost prohibitive. There's got to be a better way. And you know what? I think fucking Clorox and Dove, they need to be the ones to stop doing this shit, not me. So, and that was
You said it. You said it. That's why I'm screaming about it. Do
so
not give me another paper straw.
Right? I'm done carrying that up here anymore.
Yes.
So, and so you know what did I do in 2020? I stopped caring about plastics and started caring about racism. I don't know. I mean, that's like, but do you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah.
And on top of that, I'm dealing with being sober all the time because all I want is a fucking drink. And that's not entirely true, but I think somebody asked me like, do you want a drink? And I'm like, all the time. And the real truth is I just want relief.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
So
I hear that deeply. Yeah, I just started going to Sex and Love Anonymous because I'm like, can I get relief from this dick? And the answer is no. It works for a while, but I'm running out of time with it. So I'm like, let me take my ass to slaw.
And can I ask, is that working out well? Is that, I mean,
it's a roller coaster, and it's because it's different because it's not about sex and it's not necessarily about love. It's about relationships. And I can't go abstinent from relationships.
Right.
And so it's very confusing to my little brain, right? Where I'm like, how do I have appropriate relationships with people if I can't just cut them off, right? I'm like, at sobriety, I'm like, abstinence, shit, just don't do that and do some other stuff, great. But like, sex is a thing that will happen again in my life. Relationships happen every second of every day. And so walking through this process and like seeing the ways in which I seek validation, or I go into fantasy, or fantasy is like a big one of mine, or I just like all of my obsessive power is like pushed into one space. And it's because I'm in pain. You know what I mean? I'm like, I want some relief. And like, instead of turning to my God or whatever, I'm like, well, there's a dick over here and that's super easy and attainable. And it will work for like, I don't know, 2 to 17 minutes. And then afterwards, I'm like, like I did the thing again. And it's not the end of the world. But like, if I continue to do that and not seek God, I will drink again. Right? That's the main reason that I'm going, is because if I continue that behavior, first of all, I don't think that I will be able to have a relationship that is healthier than the ones I've had. And I want that. And also, like, I'll end up drinking again. And I'm like, girl, I don't know how long I'll last. I have much more access to things that I didn't have before. Mm-hmm. And like, you know what I mean? And like, fentanyl is straight up killing people. The drug supply is poisoned. And so I'm like, girl, if I go out, like, alcohol is my favorite thing, but that doesn't mean I didn't hoover up everything in my space. Like, I don't think I have, the line of like, I might have another drunk, but I don't have another recovery. Mm-hmm. Like, and so I'm like, girl, let me take care of this. Let me stop trying to suck somebody's soul out through their dick or crack their neck open and drink their essence. And let me like go to slaw and try to try to heal in this way a little bit more and be reminded that the solution is always, like, I know what the solution is. I always just get very distracted by shiny things is really what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was gonna, I guess that kind of answers my next question, or my one of my final questions, but what is something you struggle with now in sobriety and relationships? Is there something else, or is that the big one at this moment?
So the one that I see the most is relationships. I've got a bunch of stuff. I have narcolepsy and ADHD, so there's like health stuff that is always kind of like circling. And excuse me, I'm much better at treating all of those things. Much better at treating my narcolepsy and my sleep apnea. Much better about treating ADHD. Still have the impulses, so like impulses to do just banana shit with ADHD. And still horrible with money. So those are like, money is coming, right? Like I can see money coming down the horizon to like attack me. But relationships like are the thing. The beginning of the year, I like did a thing I've never done before and be like, I have feelings for you to another person. Never said it before because I thought I'd spontaneously combust and die. And that like got weird, right? Like as it does. I had been I had been really, really close friends with this person for like years, for like 3 years. And it got weird and was initially the reason I went to SLA. I was like, I'm going to save the relationship, which is apparently what we do, right? Like people, you know, I don't know. I've heard like Al-Anons be like, I came here to save the relationship and then I ended up in AA. Or I came here to save the relationship and learned it was all about me. It's exactly what happened. I go there, save the relationship. Turns out it's about me. My AA sponsor's like, girl, I've been telling you that you have sex and love addiction for like 2 years. I was like, I'm sorry. I had self-will in my ears. I couldn't hear you. And so like I did the steps like instantaneously and still like act out and still do the stuff, right? And have been going through withdrawal from a human being, which makes me feel like I'm physically going to die. And it is awful. And like, I am now just at the spot where like, I do not feel like I am withdrawing from the person. And I don't see them, like they have a part too, right? And I don't see them as a problem. I don't see them also as a god anymore. Like I still have like love for them, but it's the actions that I miss, right? It's the companionship of like walking into a space and knowing I have a partner in the space that I can like communicate with. It's like going on car rides. It's like that stuff that I miss. So I'm separating it from the person, which feels nice. And has been allowed to like, more God is allowed to come in, right? And I've accepted that like, I've been doing this shit forever. Like this isn't a new development. It's not like 2018, I started to develop sex and love issues, right? Like this has been the trajectory of my life forever. Shout out to Daniel, the tuba player. And so it's really like, that is the biggest area of my life, because the thing is like that person was the person, right? I did the higher power thing and that was the person. And now I'm like, what are friends? I'm like, initially I was like, I don't like any of these people. I was like, they don't know how to do it like that person. And you want me to hang out with them? I don't like anybody. And my sponsor's like, okay. And I'm out here, I'm like, I don't have any friends. No one loves me. And people are like, girl, I've known you for 6 years. Like, I love you. Ooh. Sorry. Mm-hmm. They're like, I love you. And I'm like, and so I'm starting this process of learning how to deepen relationships. And it's not a thing. I'm a runner from deepening relationships. If something happens, like, I just want to get out of it.
Yeah.
Or like, I just want to stay I will tell you everything about me that you want to know, but I still want it to be very surface, because I don't want you to see me on an everyday level and actually get to know what I'm like. I just want to give you facts and sound bites about myself. And so that is the struggle. The struggle is me currently trying to deepen relationships that I have, and also recognize that my value is bigger than sex, and it's bigger than being a sober person.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that's the only value I have. My therapist was like, is that so? And I'm just like weeping. And she was like, it just sounds like you just want to exist. and like have companionship in which you do that, where you're not talking about sobriety all the time and you're not thinking about having sex all the time. And I was like, oh, well.
Sounds pretty nice, right? I mean, I know we're here talking about sex and sobriety, but
right?
Just that idea of just being able to exist and not have my struggle and or recovery be the defining factor all the time, right?
Yeah. So that relationships and like moving beyond sex identifying me and addiction, or like defining me.
Yeah. And then just finally, any little bits of advice for anybody listening who's trying to stay sober, get sober?
Yeah, talk to the people. You have to talk to the people. Like the thing is, like I might feel like I don't have deep relationships, but I know that like I also can't see myself clearly, and I do with people in the fellowship. And for me, like I've gone through periods of like, I'm like, am I atheist, where I believe there isn't? Am I and that's like usually seconds, honestly, because agnosticism is a space that I spend more time in, and then like wholehearted believing. In any of those states, talking to people gives me stuff that I need to hear, whether I think it's being channeled directly by source or not. And so like the fellowship, and I mean, it's all three. It's the fellowship, the service, and the step work. But like, just do it. Go to the thing. You know what I mean? Go to the meeting. It fucking sucks. And you hate that white guy, and you hate that woman. You hate it. It doesn't matter. Go to the meeting. Get in the car with the people. Go to the diner.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to go to the diner. I don't want to go to the diner. Just go to the diner. And I know you don't want to do the coffee. I know you don't want to open the Zoom room. I just do it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. It's like one of the old guys would always say, one of the meetings, like, you just got to do the deal. So when you're doing the deal, just do the deal.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not for people that want it. It's not for people that, what is it? I can't even remember. There's like
it's for people that need it.
It's not for people that want it. It's not for people that need it. It's for people that do it.
And
I'm like, ooh, do it. And I'm like, you know.
Yeah. Well, Kim,
I will say, let me say this one thing. So when I don't want to go to meetings, because it's usually about an hour before a meeting, because I'm still doing Zoom, and I'm like in bed and I'm watching like Frasier for the 76th time, and I'm like, I don't want to go. I literally am like, God, will you give me the willingness to go? And I like pout about it for a half hour, and then I log into the, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a higher power. I don't know if that's me like psyching myself out, but it helps. So if it might help you, whoever. If not,
all right.
Something else.
Please give me the power to go to the meeting.
Right? I'm like, I'm already in bed. Like, it could not get easier. I have meetings bookmarked. They're bookmarked. Just click on the meeting. Ugh.
Yes. When you say Frasier, all I keep thinking about is the way that Niles says Daphne. Daphne.
It's the entire reason I watch the show. That's like, oh God. What a storyline. He smells her hair. Oh,
ridiculous. Cam, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me.
You bet.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.